We are in the middle of a series we started a couple weeks ago called It's Personal, and it's around this idea that church for us is very personal, that Access Church is very personal, that many of us have invested our time, have invested our money, have invested relationships in this organization, and we do so because we believe that we are called to a very high purpose in this community, and we're so excited about the opportunities that God is giving us and has given us in this community. And so many of you are on board with us and are excited about this mission, and you shared with your friends, with your neighbors, with your coworkers what God is doing in your life. And as you've shared what God's doing in your life, or maybe the conversation has been as simple to say as like, come to my church. It might surprise you. It's different. It's a church that's for you, not against you, but you've invited your friends, and we've seen some really cool things taking place here at Access Church. In fact, just yesterday, I got an email which was really cool, which, by the way, if you've missed any of the earlier parts of this series, I would love for you to go to itspersonal.church. Go to itspersonal.church and you can catch up. We've got the messages posted there, as well as kind of the big idea of what this series is all about and how it specifically impacts the trajectory of this organization. Love for you to go there, especially if you have ever wrestled with surrendering to God. If you've ever wrestled with just kind of giving things back to God, and you feel like, God, does God really want something for me, or does he want something from me? Please go back, watch week 1. We talked about that. Last week, we talked specifically about how we invest for eternity. But I got an email just yesterday, and this was a response to one of our all-church emails that we had sent out, and this is a family who used to live here, attended Access Church for several years, and then they relocated, but they still get our emails, and they read them, which some of y'all could maybe take a note. Just kidding. But they read this email, and then they replied, which was a real treat to hear from a family that we used to get to see them every week, and now we only see them a couple of times a year when they come back to Jacksonville to visit family. But this is the email that I got yesterday, and she says, "Thank you for the opportunity to give to Access." And all it's, God, it's so early in the sermon to start crying. And all it stands for: we appreciate all that your team has done for our family. While we live 5 hours away and now attend only a few times a year, we know for the years we regularly attended, it radically changed our family for generations to come. We continue to be blessed by the relationships we made at Access and encouraged from the spiritual truth that was poured into us. We're excited to take the next step in increased giving. And then in a phone conversation with her husband, he said this to me on the phone. He said, "You taught our children to love Jesus, and you taught me to love church again." And this is what you are doing. This is not me. This is not, staff. This is all of you who are willing to stand out in the parking lot and wave and greet people. This is all of you who are willing to change diapers in Wombaland. God bless you. This is all of you who are willing to sit in a circle with kindergartners and first graders and try to set the anchor of truth so deep in their hearts that when they're older, they will not stray too far. This is for all of you who are willing to say, I don't have time on Sunday, but I have time during the week, and I will help during the week, and I'll help with administration, I'll help other details. This is for all of you who are willing to work with teenagers. God bless you. And do everything to take those late night phone calls, to take those late night text messages, to stay engaged and involved in the lives of people who are asking the question, what does it look like to follow Jesus? What does it look like for me to take another step in this journey of following Jesus? Because following Jesus is not easy. And every single one of us needs someone who's gone a little bit ahead of us, who's willing to turn around and invest in us. And every single one of us need to be willing and ready to turn around and invest in the life of someone who's coming after us. And this is what we mean when we say that this is very, very personal for us. Because you might say, well, gosh, there's someone who's coming along behind me, and I don't know that I have everything that it takes to fill their cup. And we've been saying here for the last several weeks, you may not have everything it takes to fill their cup, but God has given you a thimble. He's given you some experience. He's given you some talent. He's given you some expertise. And you may not have everything that's required to fill their cup, but you are responsible to empty your thimble, to pour out what God has given you and to invest that in the life of someone else. And that's very, very personal. Because as each one of us explores our faith, we're wrestling with this seeming contradiction, right? Because we've all been told that salvation is free and it costs me nothing. Salvation's free and it costs me nothing. And that feels really great. It feels like, okay, heaven is a free gift. It cannot be earned or deserved. And yet we feel this also tension like nothing's free, right? Have you ever felt this? Stephanie and I went through a presentation yesterday with someone who was trying to sell us new windows for our home. And they do that thing. If you're a salesperson, stop doing this, okay? They do that thing where they ask you the question that you have to say yes to. And somewhere they've fallen into this thing. It's something that there's a sales technique, I forget what it's called now, but it's something like you basically get this snowball of agreement going, right? So if you just get them to say yes to these stupid little things, wouldn't you agree the sky is blue? Yes, the sky is blue, right? But even while they're asking you those questions, everything in you is pushing back, right? Because you're like, they just are they're leading me down a road that is going to end with me writing a really big check. And so we have our defenses up because nobody is for us. Nobody wants something for us for free. Everybody's asking for something from us. And so this idea that the God of the universe, who knows everything about us, who knows you better than you've ever been known, actually loves you more than you've ever been loved and wants something for you. Like, that's a really hard thing for a lot of us to swallow, to really believe that God wants something for us. And so we wrestle with this second piece because we're like, here's the gotcha. Following Jesus will cost me something. I knew it. I knew God wanted something from me. And so I have to be careful. I have to keep my guard up. I have to protect myself. I have to hold on to whatever is in my hand that's important to me. And there's many different things that are important to us. Sometimes it's our time. Sometimes it's our relationships. In the last few weeks, we've been talking about the fact that oftentimes it is our finances. In fact, Jesus talked very specifically on a number of occasions about our money because our money is the number one competitor that God has for our attention and for our hearts. And we've talked about the fact that what God wants from us is not our stuff. He doesn't need our stuff. But what he wants from us is our attention. And when we release what we're holding on to, we give that back to God, then finally, for the first time, God has our attention. So, we've talked last week about the idea that there are particular parts of the Bible that are addressed just to rich people, which is kind of cool, right? Because God understands that rich people have certain challenges that poor people don't have. And so rich people need some instructions on how to be good rich people. And maybe you've thought about this before. Maybe you've thought, maybe it's someone specific that you've thought of. You know someone who's rich. Or maybe just in general as a category. You've thought about people who have a lot more. You've driven past those oceanfront homes in Ponte Vedra and you think, I would like to have a conversation with some of these people, right? Have you ever had that thought internally? So I'm going to just ask you right now, if you had the opportunity that Paul had or that Timothy had, if you had credibility with an audience of rich people, if you were able to stand up front and you had no fear of public speaking, you were just going to come up front and you were going to talk to a group of rich people and you were to give them one piece of advice, what is the one thing that you would say to rich people? What is the one thing that you would want to say? What is the one piece of advice that you would offer to rich people? Okay, now, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, but we're going to ask you to all skate here. I want you to turn to somebody in the room that you don't know. So not just the person that's next to you that brought you your coffee this morning, but turn to somebody that you don't know, and I want you to share with them what is this one piece of advice. Okay, I'm going to give you 20 or 30 seconds Find somebody that you might have to scoot over a couple of seats. You might have to turn around to a row in front of you or behind you. But talk to somebody that you don't know. Learn their name. That's a good first step. And then say, here's what I would share with a rich person. Here you. Okay, you'll think of something more profound later, like on the way home, you'd be like, oh, I should have said that. Next week, you'll be like, oh, let's do that again. I've got a better answer this time. But while you're doing that, if you come to church and you have concerns about church and money and all that, we're just gonna totally make your worst fears come true today. Piling up money on stage. This is not real money, just in case you thought it was. But here's the instructions that Paul gives to rich people. This is the instruction that Paul gives to people who have more than they need for today. He says this, command those who are rich in this present world. In other words, this isn't for people who want to get rich, and this isn't how to get rich. This is for those of us that find ourselves already rich, which we talked about this last week. It's a difficult thing for us to accept because we don't feel rich. A lot of us feel pressure. A lot of us feel tension with regard to our finances. Matter of fact, I had some really just priceless conversations this week with some of you, and to hear some of you sharing your stories around the tension that you feel around finances, around owning your own business, and some of the tension that comes with that, some of the stress and the anxiety that comes with that. And I want you to know that I'm very, very aware that while we are rich in this country, that doesn't mean that we don't feel stress and anxiety around the topic of money. And so none of this is designed to make us feel guilty. God doesn't want you to feel guilty about being rich. God wants you to feel grateful for being rich. And so the question that we have to ask is not how to get rich. We live in America. If you make more than $40,000 a year, you're in the top 1% in the world. So the question for us is, how do I act well as a rich person? How can I be a good rich person? So here's the instructions that Paul gives Timothy. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. How many of you said something similar to that in your sage advice that you would give to rich people? How did he know, right? Not to be arrogant. Why would he say not to be arrogant? Why? Well, because we all have this tendency when we get a little bit more money, we think we've gotten a little bit smarter, right? We think we've gotten just a little bit better. We think that we're just a little bit, our time becomes a little bit more valuable. We think that somehow we are just a little bit more precious to this world. It's just something that comes with all of us. And this is not an accusation. This is to me as well. I'm rich. I'm struggling with this. I wrestle with this just like you do. But Paul says to Timothy, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to think that somehow that this is because of them. This isn't because of their smarts. This isn't because of their talents. This is because the God of the universe has allowed this to happen. I didn't ask to be born in this country. I didn't ask to have the advantages that I've had in this life. And you may say, yes, but I work hard. And I said to y'all last week, my grandmother worked hard. She was never rich. We have to recognize that even though we work hard, we have been given advantages, that the God of the universe has made it possible for us to be rich. And so sometimes we see our big stack of money and we think, man, look what I've done, or look what I've achieved, look what I've accomplished. And God is saying, no. Don't be arrogant. Don't think that this is from you. In fact, he says this, don't be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Not to put your hope in wealth. Now, what's interesting about this is that Paul is not writing to a group of people who've yet to put their hope in God. This is a group of people who've already put their hope in God. So this isn't about becoming a believer or becoming a follower of Jesus. This is saying, hey, for those of us who've already said, I believe. This is for those of us who've already said, I want to follow. And if you're here in the room today and you would say, well, you know what? I'm off the hook then because I don't follow Jesus. I would say you're right. You're absolutely off the hook in a lot of ways with regard to this. If anybody has ever made you feel like you should give money to the church and you don't follow Jesus, they're wrong. There's nothing in the Bible that says that you should give money to the church if you don't follow Jesus. However, if you want to be a good rich person, you should still pay attention to this command not to be arrogant or to put your hope in wealth. Now, why would he say that to people who've already put their hope in God? Because there is such a temptation to lean into this and to put our hope, our trust, our confidence in this. There is such a temptation for each one of us in our lives to lean over here and to say, man, this feels really good, right? If you've ever had just a little bit of this built up, you start to sleep a little better at night. You start to feel a little bit better. You start to put just a little bit of hope, a little bit of trust, a little bit of confidence in this. And by the way, this can happen to those of us that are savers. And we tend to think of the savers as the people who kind of lean into their wealth a little bit. But this can happen for those of us that are spenders also. You might be high on the saving side of things. You might be high on the spending side of things. And we tend to think of this as like one's good, one's bad. Really, they are just different ways that we are wired, different ways that we respond to our upbringing or different events that have happened in our lives have been very emotional for us. And so for some of us, our spending is a way that we lean into our wealth. Our spending is a way that we lean into our finances and begin to put our hope in our finances because we think it's our spending that is going to make us feel better. It's our spending that's going to fill that void in our lives. Other people look at that and they say, wow, that's crazy. I would never spend that kind of money. Not me. I'm not going to put my hope in a new car. I'm not going to put my hope in a big house. Instead, we're savers and we're careful with our money, right? And we lean into our finances on the saving side of things. But there's this clear command to us to be good rich people, which means don't be arrogant. And secondly, don't put your hope in your wealth. Now, while I'm acquiring more wealth over here, because we often think that the solution is we just need more of it, right? We start to lean into it, and maybe it moves or it shifts on us, and we think, the problem here is I just don't have enough. And so I need more of it, right? That'll solve it. So while I'm amassing more wealth over here, I want to turn your attention to what Solomon said. Now, Solomon is the richest person that ever lived. And Solomon lived in a time, his wealth, they've gone back, they've estimated his wealth and they translate it into today's dollars, and it is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, okay? So even by today's standards, Solomon was the wealthiest person that ever lived, and Solomon says this about wealth. He says, the wealth of a rich person is his fortified city. In his own imagination, it is like a high wall. In other words, a city in those days was very, very important to protect you from threats and from outsiders and from danger. And it was very important to have a city wall that you could go inside. And Solomon says, this is like an imaginary wall. It's not real. It's something that we lean into, that we put our hope in. But it's not deserving of our hope. Why would we put our hope in what's over here instead of the one who gives it to us? When things are going well in our lives, it's easy to say, okay, this is good. I'm gonna lean into this a little bit. But then we get a diagnosis from the doctor. And he says, it's not about money. Money can't solve this. We don't have a cure for this yet. Or you're leaning into this. And then you have that son or daughter that runs away and makes terrible decisions as a teenager or as an adult. And you realize there's no amount of money that's going to solve this. We lean into this. And then the company that we have given our entire career to says, thanks very much, but we don't need your services any longer. And we realize, I've been leaning in the wrong direction. I've been placing my hope in what God has given me instead of placing my hope in the one who has given it in the first place. Why would we place our hope in the gift instead of placing our hope in the giver? And Jesus said, there's this tension, this thing between us. It is always going to be there. And we talk oftentimes about, well, I prefer to give my time instead of give my money. Listen, Jesus was very specific. He had opportunities to address our time, but he didn't. He addressed our money because he knew that our money is very much a threat or very much a competition for our hearts. So Paul goes on, he says this, he says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, this imaginary wall, but to put their hope in God. So we have a choice. We're caught in the middle. We're going to lean over here into what God has given us, or we're going to lean over here into God himself, the one who has given us everything. And Jesus said, it's like you're caught between two masters. No one can serve two masters. Either you hate the one or you love the other. Go ahead and put that one up there. No one can serve two masters. Either you hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And this is fascinating because you would think that he's going to finish this next sentence with like the devil or Satan, right? No one can serve two masters. Clearly, he's talking about God as one of those. You're going to love one, you're going to hate the other. You cannot serve both God and money. How fascinating that Jesus saw the contrast in our lives for where we place our hope and our trust and our faith. Not between good and evil, but between God and money. Does this mean that money's evil? God doesn't want you to have money? No. God gave you your wealth. He doesn't want you to feel guilty. He wants you to feel grateful. And he's just saying to all of us who are rich people, don't lean into this. This is temporary. It's fleeting. It's not going to last. Don't lean into this. It's not sturdy. It will crumble and fall. Lean into me, the one who's given you everything. And Paul continues to teach Timothy. He says, put our hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. There you go. God doesn't want you to be unhappy. God has given you this for your enjoyment. The point is not to say, oh, I've got to feel so bad about what I have. The point is to say that I'm going to come before the God of the universe, and I'm going to recognize that all that I have and all that I am is a gift from him. And so for many of us in this church, we say we're going to give back to him a priority percentage. That is our way of following what's been modeled in both the Old and the New Testament, to say there's a percentage that I'm going to give back to God, and recognizing that all that I have, all of this, comes from him. But he is the good giver. But here's what's really important. Whether you give 10% or 15 or 20%, whatever that number is, who owns the rest? Who owns the other 80 or 90 or 95%? You see, the legalistic way to view this is to say, well, I gave God his part, and now I get to do what I want with the rest. And God steps in and says, no. There's a competition going on for your heart. And as your God, as your creator, as the one who knows you and loves you and wants what's best for you, I want your heart. And so you need to recognize that everything you have, the whole enchilada, the 100%, it belongs to God. And so how we live, how we spend, how we save, how we invest, how we give, it's all an outflow of what God has done in us and what God has given to us. And so as I was thinking through this and preparing for this today, there's 4 questions that I found really convicting. And so I don't want to be alone in my conviction. I want to share this conviction with you. So we're going to look at these 4 questions together and just ask these questions to help us understand or help us determine, am I leaning into this or am I leaning into God? And so the first question is this: which of these statements creates more anxiety for you? There is no God, there's no money in the bank. You see, because if I'm leaning into this and I find out there's no God, I'm like, oh, that's too bad. But I got my money, I got my stack. I'm good. I'm leaning into this. And if I'm leaning into God and I find out there's no money in the bank, I say, you know what? God filled it up the first time. He can fill it up again. Which way are you leaning? Here's another question. Does fear of not having enough impede or hinder your ability or willingness to give? When you hear about something that captures your heart, you hear about a need and you say, I want to be a part of that. I could make a difference there. We could be a part of what God is doing in that organization or that movement or in that group of people. I want to be a part of that. And then you go to write that check, and right as you start to write the check, you start to think, oh, well, I forgot. There was that trip we wanted to take. There was that thing we wanted to do. Well, what's this going to do? It's going to chip away at my stack. If that pulls you back, if that gives you pause, you might be leaning in this direction. Next question. Do you have money in the bank, but no peace in your heart? We've all had the opportunity to, or if you haven't, you need to take the opportunity to travel, to go to another country, to be a part of the world where people have no money in the bank. We've had the opportunity to meet people all around the world who literally have no bank account. Just picture that for a minute. Like when my kids turned 13, part of that kind of rite of passage for them was to take them and to open up a bank account for them and to teach them how that works and how they need to keep an eye on their balance and their bank account and be responsible with that. There are people in the world who have no money in the bank, and yet they have peace in their hearts. And it's a beautiful thing when you get to meet and experience and spend time with people like that. And it's possible to have both, money in the bank and peace in your heart. But it's a sad, sad, sad thing to have money in the bank and no peace in your heart. And finally, how hard is it for you? How hard is it for you to do the right thing when it might cost you financially? In those moments when you're caught in an ethical conundrum. In those moments when you are filling out the tax return, the FAFSA. There's a situation at work and you think, this could cost me my job. When your back is against the wall and you think, this could cost me financially. What do? How do you respond? Well, if you're leaning over here, that's going to be a really hard decision for you. If you're leaning into the God who gave you everything you have, that decision becomes much easier. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God who richly provides. Put our hope in God who richly provides. The God of the universe says, hey, everything you have, I gave that to you. Don't feel guilty, don't feel bad, but feel grateful and recognize that you need to transfer your trust. That's what this is about. This is about saying, I'm going to transfer my trust from leaning over here to leaning into the creator, the giver, the one who made the gift. I'm going to transfer my trust to him. This isn't about doing that for the very first time. This is about, for many of us, coming back and doing this again. And for many of us, doing this again and again and again. And And for Stephanie and I, this happened again this week as we made our personal decision about how much we're going to increase our giving for this campaign. And we sat down together and we talked about a number and we both looked at each other like, what's that going to mean? Where's that going to come from? And we said, he's always given us everything we need. He's never left us wanting. I don't know when we started praying this prayer in our home. We believe in short prayers around the dinner table. You know, one of our things is like, just because you skipped your quiet time with God this morning doesn't mean I should have to wait longer for dinner, right? So it's pretty quick for us, but our prayer goes something like this around the dinner table. And then this just kind of started organically, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's just become a thing that we repeat over and over at our dinner table. And in other situations in life, we say, God, thank you so much for giving us everything we need and even some of our wants. The God of the universe has been so good to us. And if we had time today and I could give each one of you a microphone, you would have so many stories to share of how God has been so good to you as well, of how God has given you everything you need and even some of your wants. So why would we lean into the gift when we can lean into the giver? This is going to be a little bit of a stretch. But I want you to say this out loud with me. Now, if you don't believe this, don't say it, okay? Because I hate it when speakers make me say something out loud I don't believe. But if you believe this is true, and it might be like I have to swallow hard first to say that I'm rich, but I know it's true. My son and I were actually on our way to church. You know, we've been doing this Be Rich campaign each fall for 10 or 12 years now. And my oldest son and I were backing out of the driveway one morning, and he was pretty young, probably 10 or 12 years old. And he asked me this question as we're backing out the driveway early on a Sunday morning, and he said, Dad, are we rich? And if your kids have ever asked that, you know, you're thinking like, oh, whatever I say, right, gets repeated. You know, it's like he's going to go to school and be like, we're rich. And you're thinking like, and everything in me was kind of like, what do I say to this 12-year-old? And literally, so in I live on a even number street, just, you know, we're rule followers. And so we water our lawns on Sundays and Thursdays. And so it's early Sunday morning, and my sprinklers are going off as we're backing out of the driveway. And he asked me this question, and I stopped for a moment, and I look at our lawn, and we are spewing drinking water all over our grass. And I thought about places that we have been in the world where they have to carry drinking water. Hundreds of yards, sometimes up to a mile, just to have clean drinking water. And here I am spraying it on my lawn. And I turned to Peyton and I said, yes, son, we're rich. And you can tell your friends, we're rich. So say this with me if you believe it. God has blessed me with more than I need. I'm rich. Let's do that one more time. God has blessed me with more than I need. I'm rich. And now let's add this second part to it. And again, only if you believe it. But if you believe it, say the second part with me. I will not trust in my riches, but in him who richly provides. I would love for you guys to watch this story. It's one of our families right here at Access Church who's been willing to share their story of what it looks like for them to place their hope in the one who so richly provides.
I'm Spencer Hyatt.
And I'm Amber Hyatt.
And we've been going to Access Church for over 11 years now, from the very beginning. We live in the Hodges area of Jacksonville.
And we have one little boy named Holden, who's 3 years old.
Before Amber and I met, God had absolutely no position in my finances. I was not even thought about when I was trying to make decisions from a financial aspect.
I grew up, not only growing up in the church, but I grew up with seeing that you take your first fruits and you give them to God. And regardless from when the time came when I was living on my own, that was something that I continued to do and something that I really wanted to make sure moving forward and in our relationship as becoming one, that was something that we did.
So we got married in the spring of 2008. We were lucky enough to have a beautiful wedding.
We come back from our honeymoon on a Monday. We come back to work and we're so excited because we both have these great jobs that we moved to Jacksonville for.
On Tuesday, I found out I was losing my job, and then on Wednesday,
We found out that my company was being acquired and that I would ultimately lose my job as well.
so whatever plan or hopes and goals we had as a husband and wife, it was thrown for a pretty big curveball very quickly in our marriage. Attending Access, there was a kind of a financial small group called Balanced that we were captured by. Andy spoke about it, and we just figured this was kind of a right time, right place for us to jump in on this. I think from there really kind of started in the evolution and kind of heart change from, at least from my perspective, and I know kind of from us as a, as a couple.
I think being that we were still new to the church in just a couple months in, and we were new to our marriage, and knowing that this was something that we wanted to get on the same page, that we were inspired to say, let's take the leap of faith. Like, this is something where, there's 4 couples together to kind of walk through, and this was an opportunity for us just not to sit in the seats on Sunday morning, but to kind of take a step and kind of declare that we want to dig deeper with our faith and finances with other people who are strangers that we hope wouldn't be strangers after that experience.
When we started going down the path of kind of giving up our kind of fears, especially financially, to God, started tithing, starting coming up with kind of that, give, save, spend mindset. We really kind of started to see some different changes for how can we do more? How can we stretch even further, and how can we get out of our comfort zone? And that was kind of one of those aha moments to say, all right, there's something here for us, and it just again, almost freeing to have that, and knowing that this kind of mindset, it's something that's humbling and just continues to bless us over and over again.
As we look at how our career projections have changed drastically, like through that process from where we started 11 years ago, and it continues to be something that I think humbles us from taking not only that leap of faith, but how not only that there's enough, but how new opportunities continue to open up as a result to give us more of that margin.
Yeah, we never tried to stretch with the expectation that we would be rewarded, but nonetheless, we've been rewarded, 10 times over, just spiritually, financially, just to say that all our needs have been met over and over again. We never missed any opportunity to grow and give a little bit more, and we never felt like we regretted that decision at any point in the future. And so, God just continues to kind of bless us to know that, hey, we've got this, God's got this. You do not have to worry. You do not have to stress. And again, can give that up. And so never really miss the money. It's almost kind of an opportunity to kind of reinforce that we can kind of continue to stretch at any point in the future too.
And I think for me, even just hearing Spencer talk now, to talk around a heart change from over a decade to not only something that I was leading and pushing, and to where Spencer is in his faith today, not only of how he's leading our family, but how he's continuing to be a voice for even what he just said, is something that is worth so much to me, and something that I prayed for. And to see that type of heart change, I think is the most incredible gift of all.
I think the best way to illustrate this as we wrap up is, have you ever been in traffic and you stop maybe at a red light and some 16-year-old kid pulls up next to you in the Porsche convertible? Have any of you ever looked over the next lane and thought to yourself, Now, there's an industrious, hardworking young man who's clearly made a fortune for himself early in life. No, right? You think, oh, good grief. It's your daddy's car. Turn the radio down, take the shades off, stop trying so hard to look so cool, right? I think sometimes the God of the universe looks down at you and I and he thinks, oh, good grief. I gave you that. I gave you that. Don't be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth. Put your hope in me, who so richly provides everything for your enjoyment. And so we would love for you to join us on your way out today. If you haven't already gotten it, if you weren't here last Sunday, we're going to give you a folder that tells you a little bit about where we're going as an organization over the next couple of years and how you can be a part of that. But we want you to know that our goal is to expand our giving here, and not for us, not because we're trying to make Access Church a big thing, but because we want to see some clear impact in our community. Here's 3 quick ways that your giving will make a difference over the next couple of years, and that is, first of all, here and now, we want to take 30% of all that is given as part of this project over and above our regular giving, and to invest it right here and now in our kids, in their friends, and in their future. So that means staffing in kids ministry and student ministry. Secondly, Be Rich has been a really big part of our DNA of this church for a number of years. Be Rich is what we call, is kind of shorthand for how to be good rich people. And so we want to be rich in good deeds, and we want to be generous and willing to share. And so we do that with organizations that we partner with here in town and in Costa Rica. And then finally, 60% of everything we receive over and above our regular giving will be set aside for our future together. Building out a permanent space, buying land, building a building, we're not sure yet, but we have a meeting in just a couple of weeks with the real estate team to get serious again about looking for opportunities for us to create a permanent space for Access Church, and this campaign is a very real part of that. So you can learn more at itspersonal.church. I'd love for you to go there and to join with us and partner with us on this journey. Let me pray. God, thank you so much for being a good giver of all good things. Help us to really believe that every good gift comes from you. Give us hearts of gratitude. Give us hearts of gratitude, God. And help us to lean into you, to put all of our hope and all of our trust in you. Amen.